This video focuses on capital punishment. Okay, so the first question could be asked with this is, explain why some people are in favour of capital punishment. Now, if this is the idea, you've got to remember the aims of punishment to help you. Okay, so the first paragraph, I will be focusing on how capital punishment is something that people support, is because it's the best deterrent and ensures that any other potential victims are protected. All right, so the reason for this is that it's logical to say that a person is going to be more deterred by the fact that if they committed a serious crime, that they would lose their life rather than having to spend time in prison. Now, the impact that this would have on a person's life is that they may be willing to support capital punishment, to protest for it, or to support states like Texas where it is allowed. The second paragraph is that it should be supported as it allows retribution to take place. Now, this because if a person has lost their life, then it seems that, or some people would justify that it would be fair that that person is lost. That person loses their life. Okay, they've lost their right to life too. So it kind of links with the teaching. Not this is a religious answer, but it links with the teaching of eye for an eye. Now. So what you can do there is you can link it all to the idea of retribution to take place, and it seems fair that if somebody's taken a life, that they have their life taken away from them, and then you can talk about the impact, and that's the same as I said before, campaigning for the UK to change its stance, supporting states like Texas. Okay, a third idea that you want to go, if you want to go down sort of this route, is the fact that capital punishment is cost effective. The fact that prisons across the world, all right, are overcrowded, well, it means that they would be less full, and the country would be less, would have less of a financial burden to support the lives of prisoners in prison if they were put to death. Okay, so the impact of that is that these people would say that maybe then we could invest this money that we're investing in prisons, we can invest it into other things, whether that be education or health. Okay. Now, this could come up as an alternative, what's called as an evaluation question. So obviously you need to know the other side of the argument as well. And once again, we're back to the ideas, back to those aims of punishment. So a reason why somebody would say that capital punishment is wrong is that it doesn't allow a criminal to reform. Okay, and the reason for that is obviously it's very simple as before, is because they are dead. Now, the impact of that on the person's life is that they wouldn't want what's called capital punishment to take place, but instead that they should feel that there should be more investment into rehabilitation programs. Okay, now. Another one is that it's directly challenging the idea of it being a deterrent. All right. So, for example, and I'm always blown away by this, right? Because I'm surprised that in states where capital punishment is allowed in the United States of America, the murder rate is actually higher than what it is in states where it's not allowed. All right. So therefore, these people would say, look, it shouldn't be supported, and Pope Francis included in that. Okay, he's openly criticised states like Texas, okay, or the US stance in what's called as a whole, all right, on capital punishment, all right, is the fact that it doesn't work. And some people might say that you would then go and support groups like Amnesty International who campaign against it, as well as other things about human welfare. Another reason is that it could cause the loss of innocent life. Okay, that this is another mind-blowing statistic that there are 123 people in the United States of America who were on death row, were meant to be executed, but were actually exonerated for their crimes. They were found to be innocent. All right, so therefore, these people would say, look, we can't allow capital punishment. All right, and instead it actually reveals that maybe we should be investing more in things that ensure that criminals, the right criminals, are always caught. Okay, so it could be in the police system, in the legal system, that sort of idea. Now, if we're looking at Catholic views, all right, that try and remember here, right, that it's like a 10%, 90% split, if you want, okay? 10% of Catholics would support it. It's probably even less than that, okay? But you've got to include that in your answer, that some Catholics are not in favour of it, but accept it, okay? And then the more general view is that they're against it. So the first answer is that you want to say that a minority of Catholics think that it's acceptable in certain circumstances as what's called, it allows retribution to take place and is a deterrent, all right? And the teaching that you can link with this is an eye for an eye, all right? Sort of the justification, a life for a life. However, as I said, generally, almost all Catholics are against it, all right? And the reasons for this is a lot to do with the teachings of Jesus and then today's Pope as well. So if we look at sort of the teachings of Jesus, all right, he says that we should focus on forgiveness, okay? And as a result of that, I suppose, on reformation when it comes to punishment, all right, and rehabilitation. A teaching to back that up is what's called, what Jesus says to Peter, is that we should not forgive 7 times, all right, but 77 times or 70 times 7 times, depending on your reference. You can also say about the fact that reform is more important. So the first bit about forgiveness, the second one about reform. And another reason for this is that Jesus said that we should not pay back evil with evil, all right, which I suppose you could translate it as being, do not pay back murder with murder. And there are obviously other teachings you can include as well, all right? So, for example, you could talk about let him without sin cast the first stone, which seems to be a direct teaching for Jesus to say that capital punishment is wrong. The final answer I would be talking about, so it gives a good variety to your answer too, is the fact that capital punishment doesn't work to deter others, and the fact it's been openly criticised by today's church, and in particular by today's Pope, okay, Pope Francis, that he has said that you've got to look at the facts, and in states where capital punishment is allowed, the murder rate is higher than in states that do allow it, okay? Now, sorry, it's higher than those that don't allow it, sorry, okay? Now, another sort of one, you say that only God should decide when life ends, okay? All life is sacred, and God said in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill, all right? So you can obviously go down that route with it as well. Now, it could come up as an evaluation question, all right? Catholics, it's got all Catholics should be against capital punishment. Now, if that question comes up, then obviously you need to know the for and against. Well, we've kind of referred to that a little bit above, all right? But in your paragraphs, you need to sort of talk about why they support capital punishment, all right? That you can talk about the idea of an eye for an eye, all right? The fact that it allows retribution to take place, all right? So the Old Testament teaching of eye for an eye almost justifies it, or someone say that it's being justified, all right? And you can also back that up with the idea of the teaching from the Old Testament that said, man was made like God, so whoever murders a man will himself be killed by his fellow man, all right? So you could use that one to back it up in a separate paragraph if you wanted. Another one you talk about is the teaching of St. Paul, okay, and he sort of speaks about, it's the idea of that Jesus gave as well, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, the idea of following the instructions of a government, about the government almost being just, their actions being justified by God, all right? Now, St. Paul came out and said that a ruler of a country is God's servant and carries out God's punishment on those who do evil. So St. Paul, all right, is teaching there could be applied to capital punishment and justifying it. The fact that if the government says it's okay, then it is okay, all right, because they are, to use his words, God's servant who carries out God's punishment. Okay, now the impact of this is the same kind of ideas that we spoke about before, talking about supporting capital punishment, campaigning for it, supporting states like Texas where it is allowed, investment in what's called a police force and the legal system to ensure that we are catching the right criminals, so that those put to death, all right, through capital punishment are the correct people. Now, the alternative side of this, the main Catholic view, the fact that they don't support capital punishment. Now, the three, okay, things to really focus on are reformation, all right, forgiveness, and about how it doesn't allow, it isn't a deterrent. And then you can also speak about the fact that only God decides when life ends, All four of those points are quite straightforward, all right? So feel free to pick whichever ones you feel most comfortable with, all right? So when we're talking about the fact that it's more important to reform criminals, then you can talk about Jesus' teaching when it comes to the adulterous woman, and he says that him without sin cast the first stone, all right? Sort of saying that can directly be applied to capital punishment, and saying that it no one's perfect, and who are we to judge? Only God is the person who is there to judge, all right, particularly when it comes to life, all right, to someone's life. So therefore, capital punishment shouldn't be allowed. The other one then is the fact it doesn't act as a deterrent, and you can speak about what Pope Francis identified about the murder rate in states with and without the capital punishment. Then you can also look at the idea of only God should decide when life ends, all right, and that's obviously because all life is sacred, and that God said, "Thou shalt not kill." The final one is Jesus' teachings on forgiveness. So we should focus more on trying to forgive people and help them to change, all right? And you can link that to the teaching that Jesus said to Peter about we should forgive 70 times 7 times, all right? Now, the impact of all this sort of stuff, all right, is, again, it's quite straightforward. They'd be against capital punishment. They'd support the UK stance. They'd support the Pope. They might support charities like Amnesty International that campaign against capital punishment. They would want more investment into rehabilitation programs in prisons, that sort of idea. Okay, so that concludes the capital punishment and Catholic views on it.